Hello, this is Alan again, back in the recording closet, but the recording equipment that I used last time has been purloined for the time being. So instead, I'm simply recording on an iPhone, which is not optimal, but it'll do for now. Recent circumstances have opened up a good bit of free time for me, so I was able to work on this project a lot more than I expected. So this first update video is also coming a bit sooner than expected. I can get into the details of that later, but for now, I'll just give you a little glimpse into what I've been working on. As far as the design aspect, I have this sheet that you can see in front of you. A proper mess, but it's a start. On the left, you can see the names of just about everyone who's mentioned by name. Only one of them is really a Viking, which is a little troublesome, because a lot of these people are only mentioned once. So they're sort of important, but also not really important. So in the actual short, they probably won't have, a character introduction and an arc or anything like that. You probably won't even know who's who. And, you'll only know who's who by watching some sort of behind-the-scenes feature where I say, this is Wolfstan, this is Edward, this is Wolfmare, this is Leifsonu, such and such. And over on the right side, you can see where I am trying to figure out the proportion of armor, I guess you could say. Because, of course, not everyone had the same level of armor in the Anglo-Saxon army. Some people weren't really rich enough to afford armor, so they probably had maybe a helmet or maybe just a shield, and that was it. That was as much protection as they could get. And then, of course, you have the Thanes, who had the most armor, the best weapons, but there aren't very many of them. So I'm trying to figure out how to scale the armor, I guess. With the Thanes having the best armor, but having the fewest number of them, and all the regular farmers and such that were more or less drafted having just a shield. And I'm trying to figure out, because there's going to be a good few crowd shots, I would imagine. And we need to figure that kind of thing out. Because if no one has good armor, it won't be realistic. And if everyone has good armor, it will also not be realistic. And you can see the color scheme down at the bottom is probably what caught your eye first. This is, as the name implies, it's a color palette for the two opposing sides. The Vikings have cooler, more ocean-based colors, blues, purples, and grays. And the Anglo-Saxons have warmer earth-type colors, green and brown and such. And, this is partly because the Vikings, of course, came from the ocean. Not that they spawned from the ocean, but that is where they were located. And the the Anglo-Saxons were based on land for the most part. But I'm starting to second guess this because, the image I'm using as a reference more than any other image really is this one here. And it's a group of reenactors. And I really like the blue cloaks they have. But unfortunately, if I stick to my color palette, that would mean they'd get mixed up with the Vikings. So I need to find some kind of way around that. Although the helmets would probably be a good means of distinguishing who's who. But I can figure that out later on. And you can see some of the characters have their own unique color schemes as well. Not everyone has the same colors, because we don't want them to get mixed up, especially when they have helmets on, because when they have that chainmail aventail over their face, some of them have that, then it's hard to tell them apart. You can see I'm not quite happy with this drawing here, because I'm a little bit out of practice as far as drawing. So this is the first time I've drawn in a good while. So the thing is, I always start with the head, and then I do the shoulders, then the arms, then the torso, or I do the arms and the torso more or less at the same time, which is not good, I understand, but I'm trying to overcome that bad habit. And I always do the legs last, so they just never seem to come out right. They always end up too thick or long or something. And yeah, so I'm not exactly happy with this one, but it is what it is. And I'm still trying to get the feel of what the Anglo-Saxons will look like, because I like the shoulder cloak, and that's about it. It's the shoulder cloak and then the sort of shorter cloak kind of thing with the chainmail showing underneath it. I like that, but everything else is still subject to change. Now, this image I'm a lot more happy with, as you can probably tell, because I put a whole lot more effort into it. It's supposed to be Britwold, who is the oldest person in the Anglo-Saxon army. Probably. The poem goes out of its way to mention the fact that he is old. So he's probably up there in years. Maybe even older than, I forgot his name. Britnoth. Because Britnoth he was in his 60s, which is really old for the Dark Ages. And the poem doesn't mention Britnoth being old. It mentions he has white hair. But it does mention Britwold being old, so he might have been even older than Britnoth. So I thought that was interesting. But you can see some of the same elements here. The chainmail coat underneath the cloak, the big wooden shield, the shoulder cape kind of thing. And I thought about maybe to distinguish some of the Anglo-Saxons from the Vikings, because the Anglo-Saxons were Christian at this point. They had been Christianized. And I thought about maybe giving them this sort of brooch on their cloak, the shoulder cape kind of thing, that has this cross on it, so it's easy to tell who's who. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Still figuring out what to have, what not to have, what kind of belts they should have, things like that. Let's see. I'm still also, because this is supposed to be animated, I'm sorry, I forgot how to speak for a minute. Since this is supposed to be animated, I'm still trying to figure out what level of detail we should have in the character designs, because people, they seem to think that the Anglo-Saxons were brutes, barbarians, not too dissimilar to the Vikings, but the opposite is true, actually. If you look at some of the relics found in Sutton Hoo especially, that was an amazing archaeological find. The helmets that they wore, and the accessories, the shoulder clasps, their belt buckles, their swords, just amazing to look at. Works of art in every sense of the word. And we can't do that. That is way beyond the ability of me, or probably anyone that will work on this project, because details take time, a lot of time. it took me long enough just to get this drawing of Britwold made. And especially when you're animating, things take a long, long time. And the more detail you have, yes, it will look better, but it will also take a lot longer. And the longer things take, the more people want to be paid, which is a problem. So, still working that out. I would like to at least allude in some kind of way to the just insane amounts of detail that were on their helmets and shields and swords and all that. But it will definitely not be in every shot, maybe in a couple close-up shots, but still working on that. I think that's all I have for the design side of things. But I kind of like this. I think that I'll keep recording these all in one take because it just seems more organic that way. It seems more natural. And it's also less work, which is good because video editing is not my specialty. That's my brother's area of expertise. And the less I have to do to get these videos made that has to do with computers, the better. Because I'm fast becoming a modern-day Luddite. I just don't like computers. I don't like them. So I'll probably keep all these videos to just one audio take. And hopefully I get better at this as time goes on, but I've never been the best at extemporaneous speaking. So let's move on to the story side of things. Sorry. So I was wondering, because the poem itself it's pretty short, not terribly long. Certainly no Beowulf, but the beginning and the end are missing, but we can still sort of extrapolate what happened. And I was wondering, as I started to figure out the screenplay for this, I was wondering how true to the story I should stay. Because the poem itself, it's short, it's probably not the most realistic or accurate of accounts, even though it's as accurate an account as we can get, most likely. But because I really don't want to sorry. I really don't want to, step in and meddle with this and mess it all up, because this isn't just a fairy tale. This is a real story, a real event where real people died. And God help me if I should treat that lightly, because I imagine not everyone will take this as seriously as I do, but this is not something I will approach lightly. I mean, Britnoth, he was a real person. He has a statue over where the Battle of Maldon took place, and you can actually visit his tomb, where his remains are kept, at, I think it's Eli Cathedral. So I really don't want to step in and muddle things up. But at the same time, I do think a little bit needs to be added as far as the historical side of things. Because as I looked things up, the history and the background behind this battle, it actually adds a good bit to the story. And a little bit is admittedly speculation, but it's interesting speculation. Now, on the Anglo-Saxon side of things, King Edward, he was murdered. I think that's probably what he's known best for, the fact that he was murdered. And his little brother, Aethelred. I'm sorry if I butcher these Old English names, but I don't really speak Old English, so you'll have to bear with me. Aethelred, who was about 12 when he took the throne. And when you think about it, Britnoth, he was old when the Battle of Maldon took place. And the Battle of Maldon only took place about 16 years after Aethelred was crowned. So Britnoth was probably around when Aethelred took the throne. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to get water or something. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get some water, even though it didn't seem to help very much. As I was saying, Britnoth, he was probably around when Aethelred took the throne. Now, on the other side of things, Olaf Tryggvason, I think I'm saying that right. If my sources are correct, which the internet is, of course, always correct, he was the rightful king of Norway. But unfortunately, his father was killed, so he and his mother, well, his mother and he, because he was only a baby at the time, they had to flee to Russia, where Olaf was brought up as a Viking. So, later on, when Olaf is in his late 20s or thereabouts, Viking raids begin along the coast of anglo-saxon England. And Aethelred, he's the king at the time. And this is where the speculation begins. Aethelred, immediately after the Battle of Maldon, which, spoiler if you don't know, but the Anglo-Saxons lost the battle, and the Vikings more or less had free reign over the Anglo-Saxon English coast. Over the coast of England, sorry. And immediately after the Battle of Maldon, I haven't read about any further resistance. All I've heard is that Aethelred just paid them off. He paid a tremendous sum of gold, just an absolutely ludicrous amount. And that was how the Vikings were not stopped, more appeased. So I figured that when the Vikings started their raids, Aethelred probably didn't want to fight them at all. He probably wanted to buy them off from the get-go. And since Aethelred was not at the battle, which, he's the king, he should be defending his people, it stands to reason that Britnoth was the one that wanted to fight them. Now, he was the Ealdorman of Essex, which, again, assuming my sources are correct, meant that he was second to the king. So he was up there. And I can't help but wonder why he was there and why King Aethelred was not. So that's one area of speculation. And yeah, I don't think there's any more speculation until after the battle proper. Because Olaf Tryggvason, he was at the battle. Whether he was leading the Vikings or simply among them, I don't know. But it's worth noting that, as I said before, Anglo-Saxon England was Christian at this time. They had been Christianized very thoroughly. It's actually a very fascinating subject to read about. But not too long after the Battle of Maldon, Olaf, he became the king of Norway. Norway? Yeah, Norway. And he was a very key figure in Christianizing Norway, Christianizing the Vikings, of all people. And I couldn't help but wonder if maybe while Olaf was in England, the seeds of that achievement were being planted. Maybe while he was among the anglo-saxon thanes, he started to hear about Christianity, and he thought about it for years and years until he was eventually converted. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting coincidence that maybe I could play up in the video whenever it gets made. I won't go into the specifics because, I can't spoil everything. But, as far as speculation on these historical figures, I was actually, not really wanting to do it at all. But, I had started sort of delving into the history and trying to think of ways to apply it when I saw a video by Shadiversity, and he was reviewing a movie called The King, and one of his complaints was the fact that in historical type movies, the writers tend to not give the titular historical figure a whole lot of personality, and that of course, if there's not much information on their personality, then yeah, it's okay to actually give them a personality, even if it's not quite right. And I thought, wow, that applies directly to the thing I'm working on at this moment. It's sort of funny how those things work sometimes. But I apologize if you can hear creaking in the background. I have all my papers on an ironing board in front of me. But yeah, we'll have to see where all this speculation goes and whether or not I decide to stick with it. Because my friends would know, I've been working on the same book for, probably 3 or 4 years. And I've restarted the whole thing 3 or 4 times. So things are always subject to change. And yeah, this is where the update on the Battle of Maldon ends. But if you care about, the teaser I gave at the beginning, well, you can keep listening. Sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I came into this closet and my throat started drying up. But anyway, it had to be Tuesday. No, Monday. I think I posted the announcement on Monday. And when I got up from my desk, I noticed my knee was really stiff. I couldn't really move it that much. So I tried to... I probably shouldn't have done this, but I tried to stretch it out, get some flexibility back. And the next morning, it was even worse. I could barely move it at all. It was really stiff. It was swollen. So I had to call out of work. I tried to see if it would improve at all. It didn't. Me and my family went to the Georgia Aquarium that day. I had to limp around the whole thing. I still enjoyed it because if you've never been to the Georgia Aquarium, you should definitely go. It's worth your while. But I digress. I limped around the Georgia Aquarium. Didn't get any better, so I set up an appointment. Went to my appointment, and when I was sitting in the office, the doctor came in, and she said, "Wow, that is one swollen knee." And I said, "Yeah, that is a swollen knee." I didn't really. But she said, "Wow, that's a swollen knee." And she said, I hate to say it, but we're going to have to drain it. And I can only imagine the look on my face when she said that. I'm pretty sure that I went pale because I am not a fan of needles. But I was given about 5 minutes notice that my knee was about to be aspirated, which I didn't know this, but a knee aspiration is it's when your joint is swollen because it has excess fluid. So they have to stick a needle in there, pull it out, and get your joint back to its normal size. But they gave me these enormous, because I had jeans on when I went in, and they needed good access to my knee, so I had to get in these shorts. And they gave me these shorts, and they went down past my knees, and they were big enough for 3 of me to very comfortably stand inside them. They were a big pair of shorts. And so I sat there for a while, pondering my imminent discomfort. Then they came in, they said, all right, lay on your back, relax your legs. I said, I'm trying to relax. And they numbed the area. Then they stuck the needle in there, pulled out all the fluid. And I remember the nurse who was helping the doctor pull all this stuff out of my knee. It took more than one file to take all of it out. File or syringe. So after the first one was completely full, the nurse held it up and said, "Look what we pulled out of your knee." And I looked at it and I said, "Oh God," because it was a lot, and I did not expect it to be this sickly kind of yellow color. It really caught me off guard, and it freaked me out. But it was fine. It went fine. I'm doing fine. I had to be off my feet for a while after that because they had to get the fluids analyzed to see if it was infected. It wasn't. But my knee was sore for a while. The doctor said that I should stay off my feet, take it easy. And yeah, that's the reason why I was able to bring you this wonderful, wonderful video so much sooner than I expected. But anyway, that's all that you'll hear from me for a while. Hopefully, I can bring you another update soon, but hopefully that doesn't happen because of another medical incident. But I will see you later.